Hello everybody, my name is Walnut and today I want to stop in to just do a little bit of a video on the latest community feedback update because honestly, I just read it a little while ago and I don't normally do this, but I'm going to do this unedited because I'm very upset with how this is going right now. There's some things that I think are really, really good. There are some things that I think are super cool about what they're changing and about what they've said. And then there are other things that I literally have absolutely no idea what they were thinking because it's just so stupid, to be honest. Anyway, let's get right into it. It starts off by talking about macro mechanics. It says, overall, the coolest thing we've been seeing is the freed up clicks going to more interesting parts of the game. Our worry is that some of the races are becoming too easy to play. This is important right here. And our worry that some of the races are becoming too easy to play doesn't seem to be the case. I disagree, to be honest. I disagree with that. And I think that the main example of that is Zerg. Because Zerg was balanced around, like a lot of the Zerg units and their functions were designed around the fact that Zergs had to waste a lot of their time and a lot of their energy and a lot of their APM into doing larva injects. But now that they don't have that and they can spend all the time microing their units, it just makes the game like a large amount, like far and away, a lot easier for them. And on top of that, with the 19 larva cap for hatcheries, they don't even have to hit production cycles. Production cycles literally don't matter for Zerg as long as you have a brain. And I know I'm probably being like really stupid about this, but honestly, from what I've played against Zerg in Legacy of the Void, it does not feel fair. That's like, I can play against a unit that's really OP, right? Like, I can play against Lurkers. I can play against, like, beginning of beta Ravagers. I don't care if a unit's really OP. I can work around that, right? I can exploit the other player. I can do anything I want or anything I can to try and beat that OP unit with what I have available to me. But there's nothing I can do about a race literally macroing itself. There's nothing I can do about that. Anyway, moving on, they talk about how Koreans are, like, saying that the game's too hard or whatever. They talk about all of the problems that the game has had because of the removal of macro mechanics. And this is like the key part of like their design moving forward is reduce clicks per race surrounding macro mechanics, potentially increasing players' interactions with creep spread more, bring back some of the necessary components of each race, but not go all the way back to strength per mechanic. We like the idea that we like the fact that there can't be 10 to 20 mules late game, yada yada. This is the important part right here. Is this like little section here is probably like both the coolest and the most disappointing part. Chrono Boost is back. This I agree with because Protoss has always like our builds are not based on how many minerals we have or how much gas we have. It's entirely based around how long it takes for a structure to get out and for the units to come out of that structure. Without Chrono Boost, those timings are even worse than before, where it was already a pretty difficult prospect to stay equal on tech with the other two races, but without Chrono Boost it felt almost impossible. You could definitely do it, but you always felt like you were one step behind it pretty much all times. Now, I'm not entirely sure I understand how this Chrono Boost works. Reduced ineffectiveness per time, no longer costs energy to cast, starts default being cast on the Nexus. Be able to switch Chrono Boost on the Nexus of any building of his or her choice until it's switched out again. It will remain on that building forever. So what I'm assuming this is going to be is like a really, really low speed Chrono Boost. Like probably like a third as effective as it was before or something like that. But it'll be active 100% of the time on that building. Either that or it's going to have a reduced effectiveness, a cooldown, and will always be cast on a single building. And I think this could be pretty cool because there's a lot of strategy that, like, it's the same strategy that went into casting the original Chrono Boost, but it doesn't have the shitty effect of like, oh, I have to go back to my base every 30 seconds and go Chrono Boost a building, which I think is exactly along the lines of what they're looking for. I really, really agree with this change, and I think it's really cool. It's going to be nice for things like upgrades that take a really long time, or robos where you're producing out of it 100% of the time. Terran, Mule is back, reduced harvesting rate, no longer costs energy to cast, has a cooldown equal to the time it takes to generate 50 energy, and is auto-cast by default. So this is essentially the same thing as Chrono Boost and automated injects, where it's like, okay, well, you get a boost in mineral gathering, but you don't have to go back to your base and cast it all the time. You also have a casting range. So this just means that you can't have like 10 orbitals late game and then just do the Mule Hammer and instantly mine out a base in like 3 minutes, because that was really, really stupid and really OP. Scan and supply drop energy costs will be increased to compensate for the free Mule cost. This is good because I think they talked about it somewhere around in this post, but a big problem with Terran was that they got free scouting information whenever they had orbitals, right? Because you're not spending that energy on anything else realistically. So you had pretty much constant scouting information all the time. With like 2 orbitals, you had constant scouting information. So you could never really be taken by surprise by anything. And it just felt really unfair because there was both no way to prevent it and it was extremely available with no downside to it. So I like that. I agree with that. That feels really good. This is the part I'm really, really upset about, because they're completely missing the point yet again. Keep spawn larva as autocast, but increase the larva count per use to 3. They don't fucking get it. They don't get it. I don't understand why they're doing this. Zerg does not have a problem with production in this patch. I don't understand what streams they've been watching, what games they've been watching, because if they had watched anything at all, they would understand that Zerg does not have a problem with keeping up in production right now. I don't understand this. 2 was already enough. The problem right now is that hitting production cycles as Zerg literally does not matter. If you don't hit your production cycles as Terran, you don't have units. If you miss your production cycles as Protoss, you do have units, but you do not get the production cycles back that you missed. Zerg gets to have their cake and eat it too. They get to not hit production cycles, so they don't have to constantly, worry about their macro, but they also get every single production cycle that they missed. That is unfair to the other races who always have to be monitoring their macro. On top of that, Remax potential is able to be achieved at about 6 minutes in the game. Way too early. That equates to about 10 minutes in HOTS time, if I'm doing my math on the fly correctly. Could you imagine in Heart of the Swarm being able to Remax as Zerg at 10 minutes into the game? The problem is not Zerg being able to keep up in production. The problem is Zerg being able to Remax too easily and being able to bank up larva too easily. Lower the max larva count. Lower that auto-cast larva inject count. It's too high. God, it's so stupid. I'm sorry. I really just don't understand that. It pisses me off to no extent because it's already hard enough as Protoss to keep up with Zerg production. I don't know how many of you guys have played beta, but it's already hard enough to keep up. And they're making it worse now, which I think is absolutely the wrong direction. Moving on, we've got the Adept. This I actually agree with. I'm really happy about this because I was very skeptical of it when they first announced the cost nerf to them in the last patch. We reverted the Adept's cost nerf with both the cost nerf as well as the nerf to offensive pylon warpins. The unit lost too much strength early game. We were looking for a minor nerf to help the other races defend against Adept pushes. And we were hoping to keep them strong in the early game, the offensive warpin nerf. Yeah, okay. I really like this because the thing is, the moment you make Adepts 50 gas is the moment that Protoss takes even longer to tech up in the early game. Zealots can't keep up with Zerglings or Marines. And if you build a Stalker, your tech is a lot later. But what's really great is you can build you can get Warp Gate Research, you can get a Mothership Core, and you can get an Adept for 175 gas in the early game, as opposed to 200 gas if you were to get a Stalker. And that'll defend against a lot of early aggression and a lot of early pushes, and buy you time to get out your first tech structure and also your next 2 gateways. And I think that's a huge deal. And if you make it 50 gas, then your tech is delayed by another maybe 5-10 seconds, and that can be the difference between dying to mutas and not dying to mutas, considering our tech is already the slowest out of all the 3 races. Oracle Revelation. We've been getting feedback on this ability. Doesn't compete well with the Observer. Specific situations such as countering lurkers or speed upgraded banshees. Also big nerf to certain clearing out creep tumors. I don't know. Oracle Revelation, I've always thought, is a really dumb ability to have on the Oracle, because the thing is, you're going to be using oracles for harass, and they're not going to be usually on the map past, like, I don't know, probably the 6-7 minute mark. You generally lose them. You like sack them for drones or something like that, or they get caught out on the map or something like that. Like, I guess it's an incentive to keep them out on the map because you have stasis mines and Revelation, but they're so squishy that, like, by the time you get in range for Revelation, they've already been picked off. They look like they're increasing the range, which is cool, and I agree with that, and I think that's really nice, and I think that might help. But I still think, like, Revelation isn't necessarily the right ability to have on the Oracle. I don't know. It's an interesting ability, and hopefully we'll see some more stuff on it in the future. Tempest. It's pretty clear that the Tempest role is needed more than ever in Legacy of the Void due to units being much stronger, such as Broodlords, Carriers, BCs, and new additions such as the Liberators. However, the redesigned Tempest isn't working out. I'm pretty mad about this too. There is a better way to counter or to redesign Tempest than to revert them back to their hot state. I agree with there's no real counter to the ability being cast due to it being an instant one-click thing where the opponent doesn't have many responses other than use the unit before it dies. I agree with that. I think that was a big problem. But I saw a really elegant solution on the forums a little while ago, and they said just apply a minor, like a small duration, little bit of damage over time. Like, think Disintegrate, but it's like 30 or 40 damage, right? Apply that every time the Tempest attacks. So it gets the initial attack damage, but it also gets a little bit of extra damage over time. And then I'm sure there could be other things too, where it's like, if another Tempest attacks it or it's attacked again, it just refreshes the duration rather than stacking the damage, that sort of thing, just to keep it all fair and balanced and stuff like that. But, like, reverting it back to HOTS is not the answer right now, I don't think. Because right now, the two counters to things like Cyclones and Lurkers are Tempests and Disruptors. And if you take one of those away by reverting it back to HOTS, then it's just even less options that Protoss has in the mid-late game to counter big compositions like that. Disintegrate was a huge part. That is what made, like, I don't know how many of you have watched my my PVZs on Falcon Paladin's channel, but every time I played a PVZ, well, pretty much every time, I would go directly into 2-base Tempests and then set up a contain on the Zerg. 90% of that contain was being able to disintegrate lurkers so that I didn't have to deal with as many, and so that I had to force him to keep remaking them. If you can't force somebody to keep remaking lurkers, then there's no reason to have Tempests. So, I don't know. This is just a flat-out nerf in my opinion. Like, they're putting it under the guise of, oh, we need something to counter Broodlords. But, like, Tempests still counter Broodlords even without being their HOTS counterpart. I think they're just kind of copping out on this one rather than actually working with the design of it. Really, I don't know. It kind of annoys me a lot. Zealot Charge, I agree with this. 30 damage is a lot. I think it was, like, it wasn't too strong, I would say. Like, it was definitely one of the stronger abilities in the game. But I wouldn't say it's like, it's so OP. It was just like, it was really strong. So they're gonna tone it back for a while and see how it functions with lower damage. And I agree with this. It's like they're just testing out numbers, and that's fine. It was really strong, so I'm glad they're at least willing to experiment with numbers. One of the things I am a little sad about, though, is that if you had 4 zealots and they all charged a queen, it would instantly kill the queen, which was really fun because queens are stupid strong in this patch. Balance changes. 0.75 second delay before siege tanks in siege mode can fire when being dropped by medefacts. This is really stupid. This is really stupid. Stop dodging the inherent problem with this like ability and either get rid of the ability or do the suggestion that everybody is saying since like the beta came out. And the one I'm talking about is siege mode, or siege tanks can be picked up in siege mode, but they cannot be dropped in siege mode. When they are dropped, they turn back into their regular form, and then you have to re-siege them. This like 0.75 second delay, that's the exact same like auto inject mentality. That's saying, oh, but players might not be able to like siege up their tanks when they drop them. And it's like, but you're making the game easier by not having the macro mechanics be such a big deal. So why not make the micro aspects a little bit harder, you know? Like, we have the room APM-wise now to do that sort of thing. It's time that you, like, stop babysitting the players with something like this. Like, oh, it's a 0.5 second delay. No, just make them turn their siege tanks back into siege mode. I don't know. It's whatever. Moving Overlord drop to drop upgrade to Lair Tech. I both agree and disagree with this. Honestly, I haven't seen a whole lot of players using Overlord drop anyway, but when they do, it's either really, really strong or it does literally nothing. So, I mean, I guess that's the same as all drops, but I don't necessarily mind it so much. There's a couple of times I have problems, like if they go roach drops, it gets a lot harder than just zergling drops or whatever. But I can see why they're again adjusting this. Colossus range up from 8 to 9. That's not a huge buff, to be honest. I don't think it's going to make Colossus very much more viable than they were before. I still think they're highly underrated by a lot of Protoss players, but I don't think this is going to be like the change that makes them so much better. Continuing to test the new Ravager Corrosive Bile upgrade. Okay, that's cool. I like that. And continuing to test different numbers with the Mothership Core overcharge being on pylons. I don't know how I feel about that ability in the first place. I would rather they just get rid of the ability and like just buff Protoss, right? Like, make gateway units a little bit stronger in the early game and then make them scale slightly less well in the late game. So then they're kind of evened out on all fronts. That's the end of the patch notes so far. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.